Imagine you are a weary traveler in the 14th century. The road is long, dusk is falling, and up ahead you see the warm glow of a tavern sign. It promises food, drink, and shelter. But what really awaits you inside? That single building was the heart of its community, a vital landmark. But it operated on a complex system of rules, risks, and realities we've largely forgotten. In this video, we will answer the essential questions. What was actually on the menu? What did a meal and a bed truly cost? And what were the dangers you had to navigate to survive the night? Welcome to Sleeping Scribe, where calming history stories help you relax and unwind. So let's push open that heavy wooden door and find our answers. We'll begin with the core answer, a clear overview of what you could expect. Then, we will explore the specific dishes on the menu and how they were made. We'll examine the currency and costs involved in paying your way. And finally, we will uncover the unwritten rules and hidden dangers that every traveler needed to know. In short, a medieval tavern offered a very limited local menu. It was typically a stew, or pottage, served with bread and cheese. Ale was the standard drink for everyone. Costs varied immensely by region, but a full meal and a spot to sleep often cost the equivalent of a laborer's daily wage. The rules were simple. They were enforced by the tavern keeper's authority, and the primary dangers were theft, drunken brawls, and being cheated. Now, let's look closer at the first thing on every traveler's mind: the food simmering over the hearth. If you find this journey into the past helpful or relaxing, consider subscribing to join our community. Your support helps us create more calm histories like this one. The tavern menu was not a place of endless choice. It was a reflection of the season, the region, and the soil. At its very heart was a single steaming dish: pottage. This was the cornerstone of the menu. A thick, bubbling stew of grains, like barley or oats, that simmered for hours over the fire. Into the pot went whatever vegetables were in season. Onions, leeks, and cabbage were common. So were peas and beans. Meat was a rare luxury for most. Sometimes the innkeeper might add a few scraps of bacon or pork, mostly for flavor, its salty taste infusing the entire pot. The pottage was simple, filling, and warm. It was the taste of survival. Alongside the pottage was bread. It was the other essential staple. This was not the light, airy bread we know today. Most people ate coarse, dark loaves made from rye or a mix of grains called maslin. True white bread, known as manchet, was a mark of wealth, reserved for the lord of the manor. For the common traveler, bread was hearty and dense. It often served another purpose, too. A thick slice of day-old bread, called a trencher, was frequently used as a plate, soaking up the juices from the stew. When the meal was done, you could eat your plate. In larger, more prosperous inns along busy trade routes, the menu might expand. You might find spit-roasted meats turning slowly over the flames. Chicken, pork, or even wild game birds could be on offer. Meat pies were also popular. They were a clever way for the innkeeper to use up leftovers and tougher cuts of meat, hiding them under a thick pastry crust. The church calendar also shaped the menu. On Fridays, and for the entire 40 days of Lent, eating meat was forbidden. On these days, fish was the main fare. Near the coast, you might find salted or smoked herring. Further inland, dried cod, known as stockfish, was a common sight. It was hard as a board and had to be soaked for hours before it could be cooked. If the tavern was near a river, You might be lucky enough to get fresh eel or pike. And what about the drink? Ale was universal. It was a thick, nutritious brew made from malted barley, water, and yeast. It was a source of calories, and in a world of uncertain water quality, it was often the safest thing to drink. This ale spoiled quickly, though, so it was always brewed and served locally. Beer, a newer drink imported from the Low Countries, used hops as a preservative. This meant it lasted much longer, and its popularity was slowly beginning to grow. Wine was for the rich, or for those in wine-producing lands like France. It was often rough and quick to spoil on its journey. To make it more palatable, and to mask its flaws, it was frequently mixed with honey and spices. This created a potent, sweet drink called hippocras. Finally, you would find simple dairy. A hard, salty farmer's cheese was a common offering, served with a hunk of bread and a pot of butter. Fresh milk, however, was rarely drunk by adults. It spoiled far too quickly to be a reliable part of the tavern's offerings. Next, let's explore how a traveler would actually pay for this meal, a process far more complicated than simply tapping a card. The clink of coins was the sound of commerce. But the medieval wallet held a confusing mix of currency. The silver penny was the workhorse of the economy. It was the coin of the realm. But larger sums, like shillings and pounds, were often just units of accounting. There was no physical 1 pound coin for much of the Middle Ages. A shilling was simply 12 pence. A pound was 240 pence. To make change, pennies were often physically cut into halves, creating pennies, or into quarters, creating farthings. So what did things actually cost? The price of a meal depended on where you were and who you were. A very simple meal of bread, ale, and cheese might cost just half a penny. A seat at the ordinary, which was the main fixed-price meal of the day, could cost between 1 and 2 pence. For a skilled craftsman or laborer, who might earn 3 or 4 pence for a full day's work, this meant a single good meal could cost half of his daily wage. To stop innkeepers from cheating travelers, authorities often tried to set prices. In England, the assize of bread and ale was a law that fixed the maximum price for these essentials based on the price of grain. Towns appointed an official called an ale cunner to enforce these rules. His job was to travel from tavern to tavern, tasting the ale to ensure its quality and checking that it was sold at the legal price. The most economical way to eat was the ordinary. At a set time, usually midday, the inn would serve a single meal to all comers for a fixed price. This was a communal affair. You sat where there was space, often next to complete strangers. And what of lodging? A place to sleep could be incredibly cheap. For a penny, or sometimes included with your meal, you could claim a spot on a straw-filled pallet in the common room. You might even just sleep on a bench near the fire. A private room was a rare and expensive luxury. It could cost several pence, or even a full shilling, a price far beyond the reach of an ordinary person. Your social status determined everything. A nobleman arriving with his entourage would be given the best private room, the finest food, and would be served immediately. A humble pilgrim, by contrast, might be grateful for a spot on the floor and the last few spoonfuls from the bottom of the pottage pot. Now that we know what was served and what it cost, we must turn to the most critical knowledge. We must understand the rules and dangers that governed life inside the tavern walls. The tavern was a place of fragile peace. The innkeeper was its king. He, or sometimes she, was legally responsible for maintaining order. They held the absolute right to refuse service to anyone and to physically eject troublemakers into the night. To prevent simple arguments from becoming deadly, many taverns had a strict rule about weapons. It was customary to leave your sword or long dagger with the innkeeper upon entering. This simple act of trust kept the peace. Inside, almost everything was shared. Privacy was a concept for the very rich. You shared a long trestle table with strangers. You might even share a single drinking cup passed around the group. And you would certainly share a sleeping space, huddled together for warmth in the common room. Gambling was everywhere. Games of dice, like hazard, and the newly introduced playing cards were a constant feature of tavern life. They were a way to pass the time, but they were also a major source of cheating, bitter arguments, and sudden violence. The single greatest danger, however, was theft. Crowded, dimly lit common rooms were a paradise for cutpurses. These thieves were skilled at slicing the leather strap of a money pouch without the victim ever noticing. Wise travelers kept their coins in a small bag tied securely to their wrist, even while they slept. Some would sew their money into the lining of their clothes. Drunken brawls were common. Too much ale could turn a simple disagreement into a fist fight. While often harmless, the presence of knives meant that any fight could quickly become lethal. The innkeeper and other patrons would usually step in quickly to break it up, but not always. And you had to watch the innkeeper himself. While most were honest, some were not. A less reputable owner might water down the wine, or serve you ale that was past its prime. They might serve spoiled food hidden in a pie, or try to overcharge a traveler who was unfamiliar with the local currency. This is why officials like the ale cunner were so important. They were a traveler's only protection against a dishonest house. We now have our practical guide to surviving the medieval tavern. We know the menu, the cost, and the rules. Now, the time has come to stop observing and start experiencing. Let the world outside fade away as we settle in for a full day and night at a roadside inn, from the first light of dawn to the last glowing ember. The first light is still a distant promise. A deep pre-dawn chill hangs in the common room of the oak and hearth. The world is quiet, still. The only sound is the gentle breathing of the other sleepers, who lie scattered on straw pallets near the great stone hearth. Then, a soft shuffle of feet on the wooden floor. The innkeeper, John, has risen before the sun. He moves with a quiet purpose honed by years of practice. His first task is always the same. He kneels at the hearth, and with a small wooden shovel, he gently digs into the deep pile of gray ash from last night. He is searching for the embers. He finds them, a cluster of deep red jewels, still breathing with gentle heat. Carefully, he lays on a few slivers of dry kindling. He blows once, twice. A tiny flame flickers to life, fragile and pale in the gloom. He adds a larger piece of wood, and then another. The fire is reborn. A new sound joins the soft crackle of the flames. It is the rhythmic scrape and rustle of a besom broom. John's wife, Elspeth, begins her daily task of sweeping the wooden floorboards, her movements slow and steady in the growing light. Soon, the heavy oak door creaks open, letting in a wave of cool, damp air that smells of earth and mist. John takes 2 wooden buckets and walks out towards the well, his footsteps heavy on the packed earth of the yard. The air inside begins to change. The sharp smell of stale ale and slumber gives way to the clean, comforting scent of wood smoke. Elspeth is now by the hearth, working a simple dough made with starter, saved from yesterday's baking. She shapes small, round loaves and places them on a hot, flat stone right beside the growing fire. Before long, the warm, honest smell of baking bread fills the room. From the stables attached to the inn, the day's first sounds begin to stir. A horse stamps its hoof against a stall door. A few chickens cluck softly to one another. The world outside is slowly, gently waking up. Light now filters in, not through glass windows, but through the open doorway and the wooden shutters that have been propped ajar. It is a soft, gray light, catching the dust motes that dance in the air. The heavy door groans open again. It is the day's first customer, a royal messenger, his cloak still damp with morning dew. He does not ask for much. Just a tankard of small ale, a weaker brew often drunk in the morning, and a hunk of the fresh bread, hot from the hearth. He pays with a single clipped halfpenny and sits alone at a table, eating in silence before continuing his urgent journey. The inn is awake, but it is still in a state of quiet contemplation. A place of simple sounds. The clink of a pewter cup on a wooden table, the shuffle of feet, the steady crackle of the hearth fire. As the sun climbs higher, the quiet solitude of the dawn gives way to the steady rhythm of midday. The oaken hearth transforms from a sleeping shelter into a bustling hub of the local world. The main meal of the day is not in the evening, but in the late morning, around 10 or 11 O'Alec. The inn now hums with a new energy. Over the roaring fire, the great black cauldron is bubbling. It holds the day's pottage, thick with barley and beans, and its savory steam fills the entire common room. Elspeth stands at a long trestle table, slicing enormous loaves of dark rye bread, a knife thumping a steady rhythm against the wood. The door opens and closes, admitting a stream of new arrivals. A group of local farmers, their faces weathered by the sun, come in to escape the day's work. They loudly debate the health of their crops. They are followed by two merchants, their fine wool coats marking them as men of means. They take a table near the fire and speak in low, serious tones about the price of wool in the northern markets. Soon after, a local reeve, an official from the nearby manor, stops in. He comes not just for a meal, but to share news and conduct his business in this central public space. The soundscape of the inn grows louder, more complex. The low murmur of morning has become a chorus of voices. The clatter of wooden spoons against pewter bowls mixes with hearty laughter. John the innkeeper moves through the room, his voice rising above the din as he shouts an order to a serving girl. You find a space at the communal table, sitting elbow to elbow with a man you have never met. A large dish of pottage is placed in the center, and everyone helps themselves. There is no sense of private space here. All is shared. The bread, the salt, the conversation. A traveler at the far end of the table pays for his meal with a strange-looking coin. John the innkeeper picks it up, inspects it closely, and bites it, his mind working to calculate the complex exchange rate. The rush-strewn floor is now a site of constant activity. A scruffy dog wanders in from the yard, sniffing hopefully for any dropped morsel. A few chickens dart in and out of the open door, pecking at stray grains. The quality of the ale is a frequent topic of conversation. Is it fresh? Is it strong enough? The farmers praise John's latest brew, a sign of great respect for the innkeeper's skill. The midday meal is a time of community, of business, and of sustenance. A brief, bustling pause in the rhythm of a long medieval day. As the afternoon light begins to soften and the shadows lengthen, the work of the day concludes. The tavern prepares for the evening, a time for stories, songs, and strangers. The room, which had emptied after the midday meal, begins to fill once more. This time, it is with locals finished with their labor and travelers settling in for the night. John moves around the room, lighting a few tallow candles and rushlights. They are expensive, so he uses them sparingly. Their flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, making the familiar room seem mysterious and new. Suddenly, the crowd near the door parts. A traveler with a small viol, a type of early fiddle, has arrived. He is a minstrel, and his appearance is a major event. He accepts a drink, finds a stool near the fire, and begins to play. A hush falls over the room as a sad, sweet melody fills the air. After the song, he begins to tell a story, an old epic poem of a forgotten hero. The room is captivated, but not everyone is listening. In a dimly lit corner, a tense game of hazard is underway. The sharp rattle of dice on the wooden table is a counterpoint to the minstrel's tale. The players, a mix of local youths and a weary-looking soldier, speak in low, tense voices. A small pile of coins sits in the center of their circle. At another table, a family of pilgrims shares stories of their journey. They are heading south to a great cathedral, and they speak with reverence of the saints' shrines they have already visited. Other travelers listen in, sharing news from their own parts of the country, painting a verbal map of the kingdom with their gossip and tales. The tavern has become a place where distant worlds connect. John the innkeeper is at his busiest now. He moves like a blur, refilling empty tankards with frothy ale, collecting pennies, and keeping a watchful eye on the dice game, ready to step in at the first sign of trouble. The air in the room is thick. It is a mixture of wood smoke, human sweat, the damp smell of wet wool cloaks, and the ever-present aroma of spilled ale. It is the scent of life. Someone, emboldened by the ale and the music, starts to sing a popular folk song. After a moment, a few more voices join in, then a few more, until the whole tavern is singing. The sound is rough and joyous. Even a wealthy guest, who had been quietly sipping a cup of spiced wine, cracks a smile. In the warm glow of the firelight, friendships and rivalries are forged, and for a few hours, a collection of strangers becomes a community. But even the liveliest evening must end. As the hour grows late, the songs fade away. The stories have all been told. The crowd begins to thin as locals head home to their own beds and the minstrel packs away his viol. John the innkeeper moves to the center of the room. His voice is quieter now, but still firm. He calls out a last call for ale. One or two travelers take him up on the offer, draining their cups in contemplative silence. The boisterous energy of the evening has dissolved, leaving behind a warm, weary calm. The final chores begin. John walks to the great hearth. He does not extinguish the fire. Instead, he carefully banks it for the night. With a long iron poker, he pushes the large, half-burned logs together. Then, he covers them with a thick layer of ash. This will keep the deep embers alive, a warm heart that will slumber until he wakes it again at dawn. The bright, dancing flames are gone. Only a deep, pulsing red glow remains. He moves to the entrance. The great wooden door, which has welcomed so many, is pushed shut. A heavy wooden bar is lifted from its hooks on the wall. John slides it into place across the door, its weight settling into the thick iron brackets with a solid, reassuring thud. The sound echoes in the quiet room. The oaken hearth is now sealed, a small island of safety against the dark and silent world outside. The few remaining travelers find their places to sleep. Most, like you, will rest here in the common room. A space is found on a straw-filled pallet near the hearth. It isn't much, but it is warm. The scratchy wool blanket smells faintly of wood smoke and countless other travelers before you. The straw rustles beneath you, smelling of dry fields and summer sun. The last of the candles are pinched out. The room falls into a profound darkness, broken only by the faint, deep red glow of the hearth. Your eyes slowly adjust. The shapes of the other sleepers are just soft mounds in the shadows. The soundscape of the inn shrinks. The chorus of voices and music has faded. Now you hear only the smallest, most intimate sounds. The gentle, rhythmic crackle of the dying fire. The low and steady snores of the merchant sleeping on the pallet next to you. Outside, the wind sighs softly as it presses against the thick wooden shutters. From far away, across the dark fields, comes the lonely hoot of an owl. Here, in the warmth of the common room, you are sheltered. The road was long. The day was full. But now there is only rest. A simple, profound feeling of safety. The embers glow softly. The world is quiet, and sleep finally comes. Ready to unwind more deeply? If you enjoyed this journey into the world of the medieval tavern, continue your travels with one of our bedtime history episodes. Thanks for watching.